Stinson, is there anything you would like to add?
There is actually.
Okay.
I'm glad a representative from NextEra is here, and I just have a few questions about the East Hampton, New York battery storage facility, the Warwick, New York battery storage facility, the one that they decided not to build in South Fulton, Georgia due to the risk, the one where the EMS responders were injured in Chandler, Arizona, and the one in East Hampton, New York, and Warwick, New York really stuck out because the alarm that he's saying is so efficient went off a day later after the storm cleared. This is not a risk we can have for our community. My granddaughter's is less than a half mile away. The neighborhood backs up. My daughter's there also, my son-in-law. I think it's asinine to plant a battery storage facility next to 2,500 of 2,500 employees and potentially risk our local economy and tell everybody it's for $750 to $1 million savings per year. I don't think the risk is worth the reward. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bickett, I will give you and your team an opportunity to answer Mr. Stinson's concerns.
Thank you. So there's a lot of information out there available if you want to look at online about battery storage. Some of it's misinformation, some of it's accurate, but a lot of it is outdated. And I want to point to the fact that this technology that's being proposed is not the same technology which has been referenced in these events. But I would want to invite Josh Adams, who is the fire safety expert at NextEra, to speak to the points that were raised by Mr. Smith.
Just for clarification,
Hang on.
I
Let's do this organized.
Sure.
If you would like to speak, you can come back to the podium, but I would like Mr. Adams to come up first. Okay. Mr. Adams, let me remind you, you're still under oath.
So I can't speak to a variety of them that were listed. Those are not NextEra projects. Projects are canceled or are chosen not to move forward for a variety of reasons. Regarding the East Hampton event, that is the one NextEra project where we have had a thermal event. That event was contained within an hour, and it was contained to the rack within the enclosure. So safety systems did exactly what they were supposed to do. And then I'd like to address the McMicken installation in Surprise, Arizona in 2019. I'd like to point out that was 2019, right, when that happened. That system was commissioned in 2017. When that system was commissioned, NFPA 855 did not exist. UL 9540 did exist, but UL 9540A, which is the test method for testing thermal runaway to make sure that it doesn't spread, did not exist. The very first edition of UL 9540A was released in November of 2017. That project was commissioned in November of 2017. So those safety standards didn't exist. That was a building-based system. It was not a non-walk-in, non-occupiable container like we use nowadays. That system did not have any gas detectors. The firefighters did not have an emergency response plan training them on what to do when approaching the containers. So they did what they had been trained to do for any other fire situation. You open the doors and investigate. And by opening those doors, it caused the hydrogen inside the container to ignite by the influx of oxygen, and that's what caused the injury to those firefighters. That situation, while absolutely terrible, luckily did not result in any deaths. There were some injuries, but that was a guiding light for the battery energy storage industry. Again, those safety standards have come out. We are now on the second edition of NFPA 55. We are on the third edition of UL 9540. We are on the fourth edition of UL 9540A. So a lot of safety standards and regulations have come out to ensure that something like that will never happen again, and nothing like that has ever happened again.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Stinson, and let me remind you, you're still under oath?
Correct.
Okay.
A fire did occur at the NextEra battery storage facility in Chandler, Arizona in 2019. I think that's what it was referenced. But when he said there's not another fire that occurred, or not another incident that occurred, another fire occurred at the NextEra site in Long Island, New York, May 24, not 19, 24, May, this summer. The Moss Landing facility in California, although was not managed by NextEra,
Mr.
also
Stinson, let's,
also caught on fire. Well, those events need to underscore the importance. This happened in 24, not 19. There's multiple facilities that NextEra has been involved with that have failed. Again, $750 million per year. I understand the economic viability. I want, cheap as energy as we can. Some of the people on this side of the aisle that run factories do as well. What I'm trying to say is it's not worth the risk for our citizens, and it's located next to our largest employee population, a college, and neighborhoods. I don't think it's wise to rezone that property to put a battery storage facility there. That's really it for me.
thank you, Mr. Stinson. Again, Mr. Bickett, I will allow your team to respond to the additional items that Mr. Stinson addressed.
The only other comments I would like to add is that we completely respect the concerns about safety. The other thing I'd point out is that we, as a utility, as an electric utility, perform inherently dangerous tasks. We deal with inherently dangerous equipment every day. We take safety as top priority, second to nothing else. So I don't want anybody to misconstrue what this utility is trying to do for the benefit of this community. And this is not about money, folks. This is about doing what's in the best interest for our customers, to make sure that the power is delivered as reliable as possible at the best, lowest cost in the safest manner possible. So I don't want anybody to think that Gimple is jeopardizing the safety of the public in the interest of saving a few dollars. That's absolutely not what we're doing here. If we didn't believe that this was safe in the location which we're proposing, we would never bring it to this board or anyone else in this community.
You may approach the podium, Mr. Stinson.
My response is I'm very glad, I'm not making an accusation against him for whatsoever, let me clear there. What I have a problem with is the facility and the battery storage facility itself. I'm glad that Himple's employees take safety measures seriously, and they're in harm's way every day. But they receive compensation to do so. My daughter and granddaughter do not. The employees out there that would be at risk, they do not receive compensation to put themselves in dangerous situations either. I think it's an invalid argument.
So to address the event that did happen in 24, that was the East Hampton event that I told you about, where it was contained to the one rack container. That system was also commissioned in 2017, so long before any of the standards that exist nowadays. It was also a very different technology. It was a lithium NMC pouch technology. So was the Midnican Fire and Surprise Arizona. It was a pouch technology. We no longer use pouch technologies. We use prismatic cell technologies that go through, again, rigorous safety testing. They're much safer. In addition, we are using lithium iron phosphate for these projects, which is a much safer lithium technology in itself. It's less prone to enter thermal runaway and to have such an event. And then studies have shown from any past battery storage fire that there is no air contamination, there is no ground contamination, there is no groundwater contamination. So the risk to the neighboring communities is non-existent, really. The word gets spread. When one of these events happens, it's all over the news. But these events are not happening frequently. The frequency with which they are happening has decreased dramatically over the years. And then to add to another point, there is no advanced equipment that is required for dealing with battery storage fire. all the firefighters have the equipment, all their standard equipment is all there.
Can I ask a question?
We'll get to that. Mr. Stinson,
Yes.
anything else? Mr. Bickett, anything else? Okay, does this board have any questions for Mr. Bickett's team or Mr. Stinson?
Yeah.
Who?
Mr. Bickett, please.
Mr. Bickett?
Does Simple have any plans in place for you guys to monitor the facility versus just them monitoring it from a remote location? Is Hempel gonna be monitoring it in-house locally?
Great question. So the answer is yes, and that's one of the reasons why it's important to co-locate this facility with our substation. We actually fall under federal regulations for maintaining security around our substations, our infrastructure. You've probably heard in the news, there's been incidents with substations. And so there's a high level of attention that's focused on making sure that there aren't people there that shouldn't be there. We've got video surveillance out there, which will be used to also monitor the battery system. And we will, once the engineering is advanced for the design, in terms of what telemetry, meaning what data do we get from the facility to monitor, that will be detailed later on. But to answer your question, we already monitor that area with our substation number 7, and we're required to under federal regulations.
Will y'all be able to monitor though 24/7, 365?
Yes.
The gas, the temperature, all the things that they're gonna monitor as well.
So that's yet to be determined in terms of what data will we actually monitor at the facility. They are doing a continuous monitoring of all the different methods that were described. We do have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operator dispatch. That's who gets called if there's first responders call us and the car hits a pole in the middle of the night. We've got somebody monitoring our system 24/7. That's all of our substations. We get real-time data from all of our 7 substations around town. We would treat this facility as another part of our infrastructure. So in terms of actually what data we monitor, I can't speak to that at this point, but we would make sure that monitoring, that we know, our dispatch knows the condition or the situation of that battery facility.
One other question. Did you guys evaluate any other areas in town that would be further away from residences and businesses in the middle of our town for this type of system to be in place?
Extensively. One of the things I will point out that has been asked, there's been several proposed locations, and I would add, if you've ever used a backup generator or try to run a power, something that uses electricity, and you use a really long switch, you already understand what I mean when it's not as effective when you're further away from where it is if you're using the power. The principle applies for electric infrastructure as well. If you're going to transmit power over a longer distance, you want to raise the voltage up higher so you have less losses over distance. We're connecting this to our distribution, which is 13,800 volts. It's going to be connected directly to the substation that delivers the power to the industry that's using it. So if we look at other locations, it makes a lot less sense, and there's other obstacles and other problems with where we would locate. So one of the points I mentioned it earlier, this is our heaviest loaded substation. This is where we most need this type of facility because it is our industrial customer substation.
Does this board have any additional questions for Mr. Stinson or Mr. Bickett?
Worst case scenario, it happens something like Mr. Stinson mentioned it. What's the worst case scenario, something like that happens?
So the worst case scenario is the thermal runaway event, which has been the topic basically of everything you read online, which is where you have a failure of one of these batteries at the smallest cell level that expands to the module to the rack. I'm not an expert on this, but I can tell you that it's my interest to know exactly how this works because, again, I'm speaking on behalf of Hempel to make sure to tell you that we vetted this project completely. The worst case scenario is that the thermal runaway event expands, and what we've asked for, and necessarily provided, is testing to verify that it will not spread beyond the container.
What if expense?
If it spreads to the extent of the container,
Yeah.
the gases, and Mr. Adams can talk about the composition of the gases that would be released, and he can tell you about how they dissipate through the air, but what we've asked them to confirm, and what they will confirm when they advance the engineering to the final design, is that, I said, no closer than 50 foot to the fence, will there be any risk to public health and safety? They said, there will be no risk to public health and safety at the fence. And remember, we're keeping the fence 100 foot from the property line that's nearest to this property, to this facility. So to your point, worst case scenario, you have thermal runaway event, NextEra responds, fire department responds. The determination of what to evacuate has been asked. We've seen different practices in terms of what we've talked to other folks that have experienced these things. The recommendation here is virtually no evacuation beyond the fence of the facility. That's important, because that means that the neighbors are not going to be asked to leave their houses if the worst case scenario happens. If there's a thermal runaway event.
If there was a runaway event, would it affect the substation?
No. It's the distance, and I'd have to look at the plan to give the exact distance, but it is far enough away from the fence of the substation that there would be no effect to that substation.
Worst case scenario is a blew up. It's worth to save $750,000, $1 million to build it?
So that's not even a possibility, and I think Mr. Adams will speak to it. I can give you a little bit of information. Part of the new standards he talked about require what's called the relief panels for the system. The reason for risk of explosion is still is hydrogen gas, which is one of the gases that would be released in the event of a thermal runaway event. These systems are designed that you would not have a buildup of hydrogen gas if you alleviate the risk for an explosion. So there's really not an explosive risk with this facility at all.
So all we've all talked about and heard about the toxic gas or smoke and half a mile to a mile evacuation, all of that stuff. So you are saying all of that information is irrelevant, there's no chance of that occurring?
So the evacuation radius that has been cited in the past came from a DOT regulation, and I'm not familiar with it, but I can tell you it has to do with the transport of certain batteries, which is a completely different situation than what you have in an engineered design facility like this. And what I also would speak to, again, is just what I've done in my own research, is that the older battery containers, you could walk into them, so there was an enclosure where you could have a buildup of gas and explosive risk. So there's a lot of erring on the side of caution that you would evacuate the largest area that you possibly could. We know what types of gases would be vented from this battery, and like Mr. Adams said, they pose no risk to the neighboring community.
Well, and I don't know if it was a city commission meeting or the thing, I can't remember which meeting it was on, is where I heard that there is a half a mile recommended evacuation, if that was to occur. My hang up there is, when you go evacuate the family, who's gonna put that bill? Is Temple gonna put it?
Right, so there's no intent nor a need to evacuate half a mile. That's outdated guidance. We don't believe that there's any reason to evacuate half a mile from this facility in the worst case scenario. I would say an ultra conservative evacuation radius would be 150 feet, which is what came out not too recently, but in a bulletin that was done by the NFPA, joint with other fire organizations, it said 150 feet from a utility scale battery fire. We're talking about a much smaller battery system than what you would say is utility scale. This is probably one of the smaller systems you'll find when you talk utility scale battery systems. But to your point, there's no way you correlate a 200 megawatt battery system to a 12 megawatt battery system in terms of radius, no matter what guidance you look at.
You mentioned that we don't have the final engineering design yet.
Right.
Did I understand that correctly?
Correct.
What type of variation would there be from what we've seen in the presentation tonight? Is it just what goes where, or is it something that has to do with the intricacies of the safety part of it?
So I can defer to Nextera to speak to that, but from what we've been told, what I can speak to is that what you've been presented with is the best and most accurate information we know at, is it 30% engineering? Where we're at, as far as the plan? They're working on 30% engineering. What I'm trying to say is that with the information that they know today, what you got is the accurate information. Now, there's details that would be worked through, but the site itself is representative of what we expect to see when they advance the engineering.
Ultimately, if there were minor changes, say you change the type of printer that we were using or something like that, or say you change
All right,
the storage container.
excuse me, I didn't understand. Say that again for me?
So if there were gonna be minor changes, say like we changed the brand of inverter that we're gonna use, or we say change the container that we're gonna use for the battery energy storage system, they would all still meet the same specifications and the same codes and standards for safety. So no, nothing would be sacrificed in safety. That is my entire job. I would absolutely make sure that nothing is sacrificed in safety. So the systems will always meet all the same rigorous safety testing and standards.
What type of timeline do we have when the engineering part of it will be completed?
I can speak a little bit to that. So again, we need to get the approval for the project at that location. We are in parallel working through the site diligence.
Move the mic a little closer to you.
So like I mentioned, we're currently working on the site diligence, so the environmental studies, the surveys on the site, and advancing 30% engineering. We're planning to do a site plan review to get the city's feedback on that, ensure that it meets all of their requirements. Then we progress it to 60, 90%, and then the final will be submitted for the site plan approval. But there are several stages of reviews that we do in that process. We just can't finalize that 30 until we've done all the site diligence, which we're in the process of completing now. We expect to have the 30% in about 2 to 3 weeks. And at that point, we'll again set up the meetings to review with the different city agencies. And then the final engineering drawings we expect to have in March, April of next year.
I heard Mr. Adams, is that right, talked about, those prior systems that Mr. Stinson was talking about was in 2017. So let me just ask, when was this system commissioned that you guys use now?
It won't be
It
commissioned.
won't until it's,
The commissioning is when you put it online.
okay, so when was, like, is this system, you said it was different than those systems?
Let me re-ask the question. The design functions of this equipment, not the commissioning, but the design criteria of this equipment.
Yeah, the design criteria for this equipment will have to meet the latest regulations for codes and standards at the time that the project is permitted. So as of right now, that's NFPA 855/2023, and depending on what the state has adopted, it's typically International Fire Code 2018 or 2021.
So are you saying that you will have to meet the NFP codes at the time you start construction?
At the time the project is permitted.
Permitted,
So
okay.
once the project is permitted, those are the codes and standards that have to be regulated. Now with COD in 2025, NFPA is not going to have an update until 2026.
Mhm.
And that also comes into play with your question on the design. We can't finalize design until we've procured the equipment. We can't procure the equipment until the project has been permitted. So that's what comes behind the different stages.
I also want to mention, because it hasn't been mentioned already, there will be a final site plan approval, and that will be conditioned upon approval from the fire department as well, and that's per the ordinance. So as this is further complete, the design is completed, there will be, at the time of the building permit, final site plan approval, that will all be done to look at the details before it's actually built.
Okay.
Here, Mr. Beckett, here's my problem that I'm having right now. You're here for a conditional use permit. And unless I'm misunderstanding something, we don't know what all the conditions will be yet, because we don't have a final engineering design and a final site plan.
Well, we've actually provided a lot of documentation that's representative of this technology, and it's been done under an NDA with the local city, with the fire department and city, officials, to make sure that everybody understands as much as possible about what this technology includes, so that the conditional use permit can be approved. Because any project, as I understand, that goes through rezone conditional use is done at a development stage, not at a final engineer stage, which is the site plan approval, which is 3 months away. And this is a permitting step that's required, like NextEra said, in order for them to do what's called the engineer to construct step, buy the equipment, and advance the engineering. So what we're telling you today is what we know to be true about the project that will be incorporated today at the final site. Just like what was mentioned by Mr. Abbott, and this is, everything in our business is regulated by industry standards. It's what we do, and that's what guides projects like this to be done in a safe way. Underwriters Laboratory, the National Fire Protection Agency, IEEE standards, ANSI standards, all kinds of standards in the industry. What we're telling you for your ability to make a decision is that we're going to do this project, and NextEra's committed to be compliant with the industry standards to ensure that this project is safe at this location that we're proposing it for.
And Landon, you can tell me if I'm misstepping here. I think one thing that Landon's speaking to is if I wanted to put a condition on it, on monitoring, I would be unable to do that because you don't, as of right now, know what HIPAA is going to monitor. So I think that's where the confusion comes in.
No, I think you could put a condition that they have to monitor something.
Absolutely.
I mean,
that's the idea.
if you wanted them to piggyback a certain requirement, if NextEra is monitoring temperatures, and you want them to Hempel to piggyback on the temperatures, you could condition that. I mean, that's what we're here to do. You know, and a 30% engineering, I've been in project management, and you know, you have the 30% level of engineering. Basically, the project is already defined at 30%. When you go beyond 30%, that's when you're getting all the finite details. The specifications at 30%, the project is designed at that point.
Does that help, Landon?
Do what?
Does that help?
Not a lot.
And I do want to reiterate that this project will not be built unless the final site plan is approved by planning and zoning at the time whenever it's ready for construction.
But most definitely, if you want them to monitor something, that can be a condition. You have please approach the podium.
I go back to safety.
Please.
Again, I'm certain that the NextEra individual told the 2019, which is not that long ago, Chandler, Arizona people that it was safe. I'm sure he told the first responders, the numerous first responders that were injured responding to it. I'm sorry, I guess they beat their person to them and got injured before their person could get there and share the protocol. I'm not certain. But I do know that you can't sell me on safety when you got to constantly have an individual monitoring it within a certain amount of time to get back to fix it if it does fail. You're not going to sell me on safety when you say 2019 is so far long ago we've changed our protocol. What about the one in 24? What about the other one in 23 that shut down because of the storm? We are the new tornado island. That's the last thing we do.
Thank you.
Well, quick question. What if it's an ice storm? What does battery plant do?
An ice storm wouldn't affect the battery energy storage system. I mean, these things are designed and rated to operate from minus 30 C to positive 50 C, which is about minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's the outdoor ambient operating conditions. So these things are designed to operate at their full rated capacity in that temperature range. So an ice storm's not going to affect the battery energy storage system at all.
So what happens if when the ice storm affects the fiber and the internet and the controlling and the monitoring, then what do we do?
So if monitoring is lost at the site will shut itself down. There's a small time delay, right, to allow for communications to be reestablished, just in case it was just a momentary, typically 30 seconds, 30 to 60 seconds. But if communications is lost, the site will isolate all of its internal components and completely shut itself down.
Could we ask for the presentation to be pulled up again? I just think that might be helpful. Could we ask for the presentation to be pulled up again? Josh, I think it might be helpful to go through the different components, explain the safety, as it relates to the different components.
So just a quick breakdown, right, of the cell, right? So the cell is about the size of a very, very, very thick iPad, right? So think about iPad dimensions, but, maybe a few inches thick. That's the base anatomy. That cell undergoes a variety of different safety tests. It has to be certified to UL 1642, which is a safety standard for lithium-ion batteries. It has to be certified to UL 1973, which is a safety standard for battery energy storage systems and battery management systems. So the battery management system is also listed to UL 1973. The entire project has to be listed to UL 9540 per NFPA 5. 9540 further requires that the system be tested in order to receive the 9540 certification, it has to be tested to UL 9540A, which is a test method. And that test method has to demonstrate that a fire in one energy storage system will not propagate to an adjacent energy storage system. So that test is done. The 9540A is done at every single stage of this slide here, right? So it's done at the cell level. It analyzes the gases that come out of the cell. It analyzes how quickly it goes in the thermal runaway. It analyzes what the temperature of the gas is coming out, a variety of different measures. Those cells then get connected into modules. Those modules have voltage sensors, temperature sensors, and typically a cooling apparatus. So it will have a cooling plate for the thermal liquid cooling system or fins for an air-cooled system. That 9540A test is then repeated at the module level. So what we do is we force a cell into thermal runaway. And maybe let me explain what thermal runaway is a little bit more, because it's commonly misunderstood. Thermal runaway is an occurrence within the cell. So thermal runaway is a chemical reaction inside the cell in which it generates more heat than it can dissipate, and so that process just continues within that cell. Thermal runaway does not refer to that propagating to the next cell, to the next cell, to the next cell. When people say thermal runaway, that's oftentimes what they're meaning. That would be a cascading thermal runaway, right? So thermal runaway happens within the cell. When thermal runaway happens, it can't be stopped. There's nothing you're going to do to stop the thermal runaway from continuing within that one cell. So you have to design your system to prevent that cascading thermal runaway. So this module level test here, which is done, again, by all of our manufacturers, show that on average from the manufacturers that we use, 3 to 6 cells went into thermal runaway during that test. Consider that one of those modules has probably about 130 cells on average, right? So they're contained within the module, but we go to the next level, and we test it at the unit level. So the system then has different racks stacked up, so you've got modules above and below, and a stack of racks to the side. And that thermal runaway is then forced to happen again, just to ensure and demonstrate that it's not going to spread to any of the neighboring racks within the container. And they all show that it's contained not only to the rack, but to the module within the container. As was mentioned, there are ventilation systems. So the event in 2019, to say that it is drastically different is an understatement. There were no gas detectors in that system. There was no ventilation in that system. There was no standard requiring that. So that didn't exist. There was, however, a fire suppression system that put out the fire, but did not stop the thermal runaway, as I mentioned. And so that allowed the gases to accumulate in the container. So the standard for this container is NFPA 69, which is deflagration prevention. And that requires that you have gas detectors in the system. Those gas detectors are backed up with 24 hours of their own dedicated battery backup for standby and 2 hours in an alarm status. So essentially 26 hours that they would have full backup on those detection systems and ventilation systems. They will detect gas released from the cells in the event of a thermal runaway, and they will trigger the ventilation system at 10% of the LFL, that's the lower flammability limit. So there's a certain amount of hydrogen that has to be introduced into the atmosphere and mixed with the oxygen in the atmosphere. You have to hit a certain threshold before that becomes explosive. That threshold is 41,000 ppm, which is so the standard requires that that global concentration in the container be maintained below 25% of the LFL. So those systems will trigger the ventilation, they'll vent the gases out, and they'll trigger at 10%, and they have been designed, tested, analyzed to show that they will maintain that gas concentration below 25% of the explosive limit. So essentially the amount of gas allowed to accumulate in the atmosphere will not exceed 25% of what would be required for any explosion.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Mr. Bickett's team? Any additional questions? If there are no additional questions, I'll move forward. Sir, I jumped the gun on you. I need to bring the fire department up first, and then I'll come back to you. The representative of the fire department, I would like to bring you up next. Gentlemen, you have signed in. Please state your name.
Josh Dixon.
Josh, Mr. Dixon, do you promise to tell the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Josh, I'm looking for you here on the list. No?
Mr. Attorney, I think you can sign in at the podium now.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you sign in on the sheet outside?
One outside.
I only have one of the sheets, so I've missed it. Let me just mark it.
Matt Anderson needs to be sworn in too.
Okay. I didn't catch his name.
Matt Anderson.
Mr. Anderson, do you promise to tell the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, so the paperwork that we're submitting to the board tonight is something we want on public record. So it's a list of the required documents and the testing data that are site-specific to the proposed project. The Henderson Fire Department and our consultant believe that these requirements are reasonable, appropriate, and they are necessary. In attendance tonight, by Zoom, is our consultant, which is Summit Fire Consulting, and that's Mr. Mark Hopkins and Mr. Brandon Ingram. I'm not sure if they can hear us or not, but they're here also to present and go over the specific requirements that we submitted.
Okay. The two gentlemen that you listed, are they in the room, or were they going to?
They're on Zoom.
We're here.
Okay.
Brandon Ingram from Summit Fire Consultant.
Okay.
Mark Hopkins, I'm also on the call.
Okay, please state your name. The gentleman on Zoom, please state your name.
My name is Brandon Ingram.
Mr. Ingram, do you promise to tell the truth?
I do.
And who else do we have?
Mark Hopkins.
Mr. Hopkins, do you promise to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you may proceed if you like.
So Mark, would you please go over the list of requirements and go line by line, please?
Sure, I'm just pulling it up now. So the list that you see here starts out with,
Sir, may I interrupt you very quickly? Mr. Bickett, do you have a copy of this? Okay. Okay, please proceed. Sorry about that.
They can't hear. in
Rob,
the
they
back.
can't.
They can't, they're having
Audience
trouble
can't
hearing
hear.
in the back.
Okay. How about if we, and if I need it, I'll grab it.
They could they talk again?
We're setting up microphones, gentlemen. Can you speak?
yes. Is that better?
We're trying.
Is that better? Yes.
Can y'all hear the Zoom?
The folks in the back,
Yes.
can you hear the Zoom, the speakers?
Can y'all hear? No, you can't hear back there.
The gentleman on the phone, please speak again.
Yes. Is this better?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So the document that you have before you includes a checklist of documents that have reference requirements from NFPA 855, as well as information that has been requested specifically by the Henderson Fire Department. So the first section is requesting information about the project, specifically when the submittal is submitted, and then it leads into the site plan. So this is what we were looking at earlier as part of the presentation, and so there are some requirements that aren't met in the current version of the site plan, and one of the things is that NFPA 1 requires a minimum width of 20 feet, and so these criteria are established in this front end section as being required to meet. Also provides a height requirement of 13 feet 6 inches to allow for passage of fire apparatus. Then you see a section relating to surface specifications, again to ensure that the weight of the fire apparatus can be held by the surface of the roadway. Request for multiple access points to enter and exit the facility efficiently, and then requirements for lighting, so both emergency lighting and normal lighting. And the second section of the document is now requesting for information that I think has been discussed already at this meeting, relating to having readily available information for the fire department, such as gas monitoring and temperature, any of the information that could be received from the battery management system or the energy storage system itself. And then you see dates for submission and whether or not the submission has been approved. The next next item is hazard mitigation analysis. So initially there was a generic analysis that was submitted and didn't relate to the appropriate equipment. So a follow-up HMA had been submitted, but again, isn't finalized until the equipment is procured. So it was based on BYD equipment, and what Josh Adams was saying is very much true in terms of the UL testing. UL 9540A has improved tremendously since its inception, and the testing that had been done was done on the cell level, the module level, and the unit level, meaning the battery rack level. Those tests demonstrate that a fire would be contained to a single unit. So as long as the technology applied in the analysis is correct, those statements are all correct. If there is a substitution of equipment, we have to go back and start over. A revised hazard mitigation analysis would be required. The next section of this document is requesting for the UL 9540A test, and that was something that the fire department had to go and specifically request as part of this process. So then there are any additional tests that have been done to look at large-scale fire tests, any container size testing that's been done, if there's been any explosion testing done, or testing relating to deflagration. So deflagration protection, Mr. Adams indicated, was complying with NFPA 69. There is another method that could be applied, which utilizes NFPA 68, where that would allow for venting of the gases and limiting the potential for having an explosion hazard. So I think all of these documents are consistent with the discussion and a lot of the concerns that are being raised. So as part of this review process, we'd be able to confirm all of this information. Requesting a signage package. So Lena, I'm sorry, can't pronounce your last name, but when she identified that a signage package would be provided, that is consistent with what's being requested here. Then a fire suppression package. So if there are any active fire suppression systems intended to be installed. And so there is a balance between providing a fire suppression system which could prevent or limit, or not prevent, but could control a fire, but could lead to a condition resulting in a deflagration. So there's a balance, and that's something that the submitter would need to identify what their intentions are. And then we're also requesting a fire alarm and detection package. So is there any smoke detection, heat detection, gas detection that would be submitted as part of this? Also tying back to the battery management system and then energy management system. So again, these are all things that I believe are consistent with the discussion so far. The next item is a community risk assessment, and this has been submitted. And so just for point of clarity, this would include a plume model or some alternative method that would allow for interpretation as to whether or not the distance of the homes and businesses from this site are safe. This is what is needed to answer those questions specifically. So until that document is completed and reviewed and approved, then the determination as to whether or not they're safe should be held for approval. Then also now any listing documents that are part of the listing for the equipment specifically. So we didn't go ahead and list this because there are some basic test criteria that are required, and then there are a bunch of different optional standards that could be applied. So whatever listings are intended should be reviewed and then approved. Then we go into operation and maintenance manuals, emergency operations plan, staffing and training plan, site security plan. So again, this goes back to the question asked earlier about preventing juveniles from entering the facility, unknowingly. A commissioning plan for the equipment, a decommissioning plan, and then any other additional or supplemental information that has been done. Stranded energy analysis or radiation analysis to determine spacing between the containers. So that is, in essence, what is included in this document. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Does this board have any questions to address?
Well, the one question I've got, Josh, yeah, at the planning commission meeting, you were waiting at that time on some safety information, correct?
Correct.
Has that come in yet?
No.
Okay. Just want to check it. Thank you.
Josh, do you feel that can our fire department handle fire protection? In addition, if there was 2 other house fires going on, do we have enough firemen to cover all that? And do you guys receive training to cover if there was a fire out there, or would you need additional training for firefighters?
Yeah, there would be additional training. It's a good question. I mean, this is something new, but what we've never responded to this type of emergency. But a good example is like last night, we had a structure fire on 9th Street, a 2-story structure that was heavily damaged, and I had everything there. And had to call in 2 standby crews and staff, and we also had to call from mutual aid as well, which came from the county. So that's touchy, because when we call for mutual aid and we ask for volunteers, they're not fully staffed all the time like we are. So, depending on the time, if it's during the day, we may not get anybody. So we may be dedicated there and can't respond to other emergencies.
And I'm assuming our volunteer firefighters don't even have the amount of training that you guys currently have.
I don't know. I can't speak upon that.
Any other questions for Mr. Dixon or those on the phone?
What's your recommendation?
What's my recommendation? To be honest, I can't make a recommendation until we get this documentation. We haven't got between that. I don't know what it'll be yet. And until that's provided, we can't move forward. I mean, that's where we're at. We're waiting on it.
How long have you been waiting on the documentation?
How long will we do that?
When we get done with Mr. Dixon, I am going to bring you up.
I think that's right.
Okay, say that again,
15 months, I think.
Any other questions for Mr. Dixon?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, Mr. Dixon, if you'll be seated, but stay close. Mr. Bickett,
I just don't want it to be misunderstood or mischaracterized, because while the information that's been requested is the documentation that is some of the contributors have read over these requirements in here, and it will be provided, will be available, but it will be done at the time when the site plan is developed, the final. So there's been a lot of information provided that is representative or indicative of what we plan to install here, and I just want to make sure that nobody thinks that there's been documentation available and it's not being provided. Everything that's available before the project was engineered has been provided as best we can show. And the documents that have been requested, we fully believe they are appropriate and they will be provided. And we've committed to the fire department and other city officials that they will be provided. And it will be fine. This project will be subject to their approval upon receipt of these documents. And so that to Chief Dixon's point, we don't expect them to say it's safe until they've seen those final documents. Absolutely understand that. I just don't want the perception to be that we've been sitting and holding anything back, because that's not true.
No, that wasn't my perception. My perception was that what is the holdup in getting these documents to the fire department so they can proceed with an educated decision?
We have to have a site first. Once we have a site, then engineering can progress.
Okay.
And then we'll have that document. Until we have the engineering, we don't have the documents that can tell them exactly what we're going to have at this site.
this is really a catch. This is really a catch-22. In order to go forward with engineering, you have to have at least a site, and then to have a site, you have to have the conditions in order to move forward with the site. And obviously, if this site is something you move forward with, these are going to be part of the conditions. You know, I appreciate, Landon, your position.
I don't know that I have a position.
Well, I mean, your
don't have a
questions,
position
your
yet.
your
I'm just asking
questions,
questions.
I can understand your questions. You know, this is,
Right, yeah, I just want to say again, we understand that the project is subject to approval by the fire department. We got these today, this afternoon, we have had a chance to look over them, generally find them to be consistent with industry standards and reasonable, and there's nothing that I would say that is going to cause the chief or the fire marshal to say that this is not safe, based on what we know today.
And I guess my number one concern right here is that Chief Dixon, and I respect his opinion, he is the fire chief and he's there for a reason. And he's telling me, we've had a couple of house fires in the last few days, and he's telling me that we don't have enough firepower to cover this major structure fire and if there was an incident at this station at the same time.
Right.
So that's a concern
Yeah.
that, you know, and I know that everybody says it won't happen. We all say it won't happen. It doesn't mean it can't happen.
Right, and that was a concern that we talked about previously, a couple of different meetings we had, and it's not our interest to put any additional burden on the fire department, so what I've offered, it's not in writing, it's not an agreement, but I can commit to you that Hempel will take on the financial risk. If the fire department, our city fire department has to bring mutual aid in, Hempel will pay for whatever cost that means. So we fully intend to stand behind the risk that we're bringing in, and we don't intend for the fire department to have to take that burden on.
And I'm assuming that Hempel and Nectar would be willing to train volunteer firefighters as much as the fire department.
That is in the requirements. I think it's even under the industry standards that we referenced, and all the training and all that has to be done. It will be done.
does this board have any does this board have any further questions for Mr. Dixon, Mr. Ingram, Mr. Hopkins, or Mr. Anderson?
I think I've got a question for Mr. Beckett.
Okay.
And I want everybody here and everybody watching at home on TV to understand, I believe everything you have said. I believe everything Mr. Adams and the lady have said. I believe everything Eric has said. Reasonable minds can differ. And my concern is granting a conditional use permit when we don't have all the facts. And we won't have all the facts until somewhere down the road when all of these requests for permits and information come back.
Right.
Can you, if you don't get the conditional use permit tonight or Thursday night or whenever it is this going to bring your project to a screeching halt? It does. Can I?
Let me back up. I can't speak on behalf of Nextera, but I can tell you that this is a necessary step to move to the next step. The other thing I would tell you is that because we are a community-owned utility, we do things in cooperation with our local agencies. We're not doing anything out there against the desires or wishes of our community. Folks come in to talk to me about the tree trimming complaints. We deal with customers every day and concerns. We're not leaving. Hempel is not leaving. Nextera is committed to providing the appropriate bond and everything else that's part of the ordinance along with the standards and everything we expect of them along with what the fire department expected. So if the conditional use is approved based on additional requirements, when we progress forward and something is different and it's not, the fire department says this is not going to work, we will not continue. That's how this is going to move forward, because we can't ask you to approve a final design because we don't have it, because we can't move forward until we have a site. And we can't tell Nextera this site's available until a conditional use permit is granted.
Well, and if we put conditions on that, we will put conditions on that conditional use permit. And if this is one of those conditions, and those conditions changed by the fire department, you have to come back to us and they change. I mean, you know, we would have to base our conditional use permit on what the fire department is currently asking for.
Rob, is this part of the record?
Yes, it's presented to us as part of the record.
So I think we need to understand that the conditional use permit is the first gate to get through.
What about the zoning?
What?
What about the zoning?
Well, that's a separate gate.
Well, it's a parallel gate.
Conditional use is no good if you don't get the zoning.
Correct, absolutely. But that's not part of really the conversation today. That first gate doesn't mean that we just all of a sudden have free reign to go and build the project and commission it and make it operational. There is another gate, which is that site plan. And we can't get between those two gates, we can't further the design. So for example, the hazard mitigation analysis, you cannot submit a hazard mitigation analysis on a project that has less than 60% design. And typically in that instance, you're going to submit a draft, and then you're going to have to resend it over when your project's more around 90% design. So the plume study can't be done until your project is at least a 60% design. We can't get to a 60% design without a conditional use permit. But again, this permit doesn't say we get to just build this thing. It basically says, okay, you get to continue your design and start making some commitments, but you're still going to have to meet all of the requirements, those being the requirements set by the fire department, right? So we'll meet all of the requirements for the project, all of the conditions that are set, but we can't move forward unless we have a conditional use that allows us to at least continue designing the project.
So what is the reason for why the zoning hasn't been completed yet? Is it just because of scheduling or?
We're holding on the, waiting for the fire department.
Okay.
Waiting on time?
I talked about.
Please approach the podium. Have you signed in?
I have, but I'll.
Okay. Mr. Redding, you've signed in. Do you promise to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay, please state how you are representing here.
I'm corporate counsel for Henderson Municipal Fire and Law.
Okay,
And certainly we understand that the request for this conditional use permit will be subject to the conditions. One, that the rezone is approved.
yes.
That all the conditions that have been put into the record today are met. And the ordinance requires that this project cannot be permitted until the fire department gives its final written approval. We understand that would be conditioned, which makes the task for this to say, until the fire department has had all the conditions met and what was put into the record to give the final approval for the project. We also understand that it has to go back to the planning commission for the final site plan to be approved, which is also indicated in their consultant's documentation. So all of your concerns, and I understand, Landon, your concerns, it looks disorganized at times, but it can't move forward, nor will it move forward without the fire department's approval. The fire department's not going to give the approval until the conditions in the document that's been placed in the record are all completely complied with. It can't move forward till the rezone is approved, which has already been recommended by the planning commission, which are then the findings will be adopted at their next meeting in December. I'll be glad to answer any questions, but we understand that those are the conditions that should be placed upon any granting of a conditional use permit. Thank you.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. We've been here for 2 hours. This gentleman and his wife have been waiting patiently, and I hate to take up any time. I've got to get up and
Okay.
move around a little bit.
I'm going to
have
call.
one last question for, Josh.
Okay, one last question, and then I'm going to call for a recess.
Okay.
I'm going to call for a 10-minute recess, and then bring us all back. Okay?
How confident you feel in the safety that you have heard so far in the project? how confident you feel on the project.
I don't know, what do you mean, like, how confident, what do you?
Like,
Can you,
how confident you feel like handle it worst case scenario, as far as everything that how you heard today.
I mean, I don't have an opinion on this if I don't have what I need. So I mean, I just can't make that call. I mean, the flu data that's a huge thing for us. We need to see it.
Marcos, I think, was asking is, do you, based on the information you have today, can fire handle a catastrophic event here on top of a catastrophic event here at the same time? Can you recommend and say that we can handle that as a fire department?
I can't do that. I don't know.
Like something like Mr. Stinson pointed out, something like that happened. Can the fire department handle it?
You talking about
Like whatever happened in New York, whatever happened in Arizona, can something like that be handled by the fire department?
That was the thermal runaway.
How confident you guys feel to handle something like that?
I do think that event's different, and I think they touched upon that. We're talking about two different type of batteries, correct?
Well, if it's a thermal run away, how confident you guys feel to handle it?
All I know for sure is that regardless, if it's a thermal runaway or let's just say it's a catastrophic failure, it's going to deplete our resources. I mean, it just is.
And I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm going to ask you. On the information you have, and I know we've heard a bajillion different things, but is there a threat, based on the information you have, of the toxic smoke or in that they're talking about, or is that no longer a concern? The toxic smoke that previously was stated that, you would need to evacuate and all
Well,
this,
that's still a concern, yeah.
still a concern?
Yeah.
Okay.
He doesn't have the information to
Yeah,
know.
I just wanted to see if there was still a concern
Yes.
of the fire department as well.
Yes.
I'm gonna call a recess. I'm gonna ask that we return at 7:25. I'm going to ask this board not to discuss this with anybody in this room. I'm gonna ask everybody in this room not to talk to anybody on this board whatsoever. Not a hi, not anything. If you talk to us in any form or fashion, you can disqualify us from this board. So let's,
I'm gonna go to my car.
15 We left, we had a discussion with the fire department. Are we finished with, is this board finished with the fire department? Are there any questions? Does the fire department, are you finished with the podium? Okay. And are you finished with the fire department, Mr. Bickett? Okay. So I think we can move on to the citizens. Are we ready for the citizens? Okay. Sir, you were the first citizen to raise your hand. If you would like to approach the podium, please. Sir, have you signed in at the front?
I did during the break.
Okay. Will you state your name? Mr. Cannon, do you promise to tell the truth? Mr. Cannon, what would you like to add?
Well, Mr. Biggett told everything that's good for him, but he never said one word about the residents. He's taking other people's words on that. I'm a resident. They're putting it in my backyard. The fire is only the beginning. It's the smoke. The smoke carries particles. It's contaminated. Now, it depends on the weather, what time of year it is, which way that wind blows. So we get some darn fast, big winds out there now. Like the one today, cleared all the leaves off my garden. You mentioned the substation. I've lived there for 54 years, and Gibbs and the rest of them are all operating before that substation went in. As past history, the land they're putting it on was originally a subdivision called the Miller subdivision. Dan Hauser bought the estate when Miss Miller died. He's the one that closed the remaining plots of the subdivision to general business. In that condition with Paul Heron, the condition was there'd be a 20-foot green zone between general business and the residence. And nothing would be put on that green zone. Now, that green zone was still in effect. I back up. I don't know if that was ever put in the minutes, to be honest, of the zoning section. When we changed it from agriculture to general business. I don't know if it was put in the minutes of that meeting or not. I was able to try to fight the substation. Dan Hauser bought the property, and he's the one with Paul Heron that converted it over to general business. I blame him a lot. Let's see. Is there any questions that they'd like to ask me since I live right there?
Does this board have any questions for Mr. Cannon?
Any of the other residents,
No.
any of the other residents in the neighborhood, what, do they have an opinion about this?
Oh, they're all against it. I mean, everything you see is about the fires, and that's all we know. If you heard things catch fire, I don't like to live the rest of my days wondering if it's going to be a fire or they say they've got the explosion part fixed. I don't know. But I hate to think I'm going to be worried about a fire and smoke for the rest of my time. All the information they've got concerning that thing is from the manufacturer itself. EPA don't even know about what's going on there. they've already been, surveying it and had equipment out there on that land to see which way the water rolls. It rolls off backwards towards the railroad track and then towards the creek, which runs into the river. That's only if there's a fire. So everything is if.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, do you still have that 20-foot green space and,
No, the city violated that when they put sewer lines in. They're supposed to go down the road front, but then when the Matthew 25 didn't sign on, they went down the back. And, you don't tell a cop you broke the law. So, nothing was ever done about it. And like I say, if they're 8 minutes of the court meeting for a parent, there's nothing to do about it. It was a verbal agreement. And I don't know.
Th-
No more questions on me?
now how close in proximity are you to the battery stores on that road where you live?
They're in my back door,
Oh, okay.
backyard. It's, I can't measure it, I won't go on the property. I used to, so all this started going on. And, I guesstimated that, 100 plus or more. A third of the football field or something. Who knows? I don't get on there. But I do know, like I say, everything's an if. If it catches fire, and they try to put it out, the water's gonna run down that creek, into the river. And I don't know if we're gonna get contaminants there, and that's EPA. And you can't get nothing out of them.
This is true.
They take the word of the manufacturer, whatever they say. Of course, EPA don't know anything about it. They're done as we are.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon.
I assume you know what the county did last night, or yesterday afternoon, all of it.
Well, that's a different topic.
I know, he said nothing they do matters, but you were right.
Mhm. Thank you, Mr.
They're
Cannon.
aware of it too.
Mr. Bickett, two things very quickly, smoke and water.
Yes, I'll address your questions. I can clarify a couple of the things from Mr. Cannon's comments if you want.
Okay. Remind you, you're under oath?
So, yeah, regarding smoke, as I previously mentioned, studies have been performed after fire events that have happened in recent history, and all of those studies have shown no contamination to the air, ground, or groundwater. These are after the fact studies. These are not the word from the manufacturer. These are studies that are being performed by third parties that are experts in environmental systems. And as far as the plume goes, any smoke, a significant majority of the gases that come out of a lithium iron phosphate cell are hydrogen and carbon dioxide. Those make up typically about 60+% of the gases that come out of the cell, in the range of 60 to 75% of the gases that come out of the cell. The third gas is carbon monoxide. Beyond that, you have about 6 to 8% comprised of methane, ethane, and methane. Right? So all of those studies have shown that you don't have any exposure to the surrounding areas. We have actually performed a plume study on this technology. We haven't provided it here because we have that study done for a different project. But that study did show that as long as the first responders remained outside of the fence line, they were not at risk of any inhalation. So the smoke, one being mostly hydrocarbons, goes up and out and dissipates quickly into the atmosphere. Does not plume, does not fall out, does not settle and leave any residue on anything. And firefighters and first responders are not at risk of any form of inhalation at IDLH levels, immediately dangerous to life and health.
So is the plume report done at each site location? Or is it just like a once-off, because, you know, Montana's wind and Kentucky wind are not the same?
The plume studies are done for various wind speeds.
Okay.
So the one that we've had done was done for a specific project location. We typically will do a project level plume analysis, right? Because one BYED container versus another BYED container, what's coming off of them is going to be the same. So we kind of assess those to worst case wind scenarios. We can do that product level test, and then we can apply the results of that to the layout of the project to come up with.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, are you aware of a 20-foot green space around the property?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak for or against Appeal 3530? No, you can speak at the end. We have others that we want to get on the podium, but thank you, Mr. Stinson. Please approach the podium. Okay, please approach the podium. Okay. Have you signed in? Did you?
Yes, I have, sir.
And what is your name?
My name is Abigail Wheaton.
Okay. Ms. Wheaton, do you promise to tell the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What would you like to add?
I would like to, I live on Paragon, which is about a half a mile from there. We have a large kiddo population. My kiddo came with me tonight. And our big concern, and I have spoken with my neighbors, some of which were not able to be here tonight, is that there's just too many unknowns. What's this going to do to my property value? What's this going to do to my homeowner's insurance? What's this, just what if, what if, what if? These are questions that they can't answer for me right now, and so we're nervous. We're nervous. The other thing that I would like to point out is that we've heard a lot about how this is going to save money for all of, for the electric customers. We're Kinergy customers. So you're asking to put something in our backyard that is going to save money for other people. If you're going to put something in my backyard, I should see some benefit from that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bickett, I don't know if you can address her concerns, if you would like to try.
So, I would just comment on the distance that her and other residents that are concerned about this. We've spoke to the proximity to the battery system, and I would, just to be crystal clear, remind you that there will be a plume study provided with the site plan, and this project will be subject to approval by the fire department. This project will not be built without the fire department's approval.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Her point was, what will happen to her home insurance? Do you have any studies on property insurance, property valuations, anything like regarding that?
I do not. I would point out that the existing infrastructure that's located on this site carries around 80,000 horsepower of energy 24/7. There is a potential risk there with that amount of energy going through any infrastructure that I don't know if the insurance carriers or underwriters take into account that risk for neighboring properties. I can't speak to that. But I know that there's other areas of town that are adjacent to similar type infrastructure that I don't know what that does to the property.
Maybe next, you guys know something. You guys been doing them for so long. Do you have any comment on that?
So there are studies showing that there is no impact to the property values. I can't speak to the insurance or whether insurance would even factor that in.
So you guys don't know.
For the property values, we do have studies. for the insurance, I would have to circle back. I don't know of anything. I don't know that insurances would factor that. And to Brad's point, this is essentially another piece of electrical infrastructure similar to the substation. So it's effectively an extension of the existing substation. So I don't know that in this case it would impact.
If for some reason their insurance goes up, do you guys compensate for that?
Insurance can go up for a variety of reasons. I don't know that there's a way to tie it to the project.
Ms. Wheaton, you did not use your whole 3 minutes. You look like you have something more to say.
I'm listening.
Oh, okay, okay.
Like I said, from my neighbors and I, we've all got the letters. This is not something that we want in our backyard.
Okay. Is there anybody else to speak for or against Appeal 3530? Whoever, come on up. Did you sign in outside?
Yes.
And your name is?
Yes, I did. Rita Stagg.
Let me find you here. Ms. Stagg, what would you like to add, please?
I'm going to talk in generalities because I couldn't hear all that's going on today, and I can't wait to be with you. So me and to get the details. I've, I guess my letter was addressed that I'm an adjacent property owner. I do not live, I live on the other side of the county. But when I got the letter, I was disturbed because all I've heard and all I've read and the things that can't go wrong sometimes do. I've lived here long enough that it's been a goal, I think, of Henderson and Henderson County to develop this southern part of the county with the bypass. And yes, we have craft paper, and it is developing some, but I'm afraid that this battery storage facility will be a deterrent to future business. I've been contacted about agricultural farm store. I've been contacted about housing facilities for craft workers and all. And that would be a deterrent to that type of operation. Maybe not to a manufacturing, but when Mr. Dixon mentioned the college and all the businesses that could be affected with a mishap, that concerns me. And after all, that is the safety of our citizens is a number one, should be priority for all of us. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Stagg. Next person. And let me remind people that we are trying to keep everybody's comments to 3 minutes, so try to get to your comments quickly, and we're trying not to duplicate comments. So, have you signed in?
I have.
Okay, and your name is?
James Frank.
Uh-huh, you were one of the first to sign in. Mr. Frank, what would you like to add?
I'm going to start with a couple questions for the board.
Okay.
First question, is it typical for you to grant something, such a request, with it not being properly zoned first?
This, we can grant,
My clock's still running.
no, he's got to stop. We can grant, yes, we have granted things contingent upon a zoning change. We can't, we normally grant a if somebody makes an appeal of a conditional use appeal, it generally is for the way the property is currently, but sometimes there is a change to the zoning, and it will be coupled to the zoning change. So this is not unusual, but it's not, I can't put a percentage to it for you. It's not unusual. We do see it, but it's not the norm.
As a business owner and close to this infrastructure, I have requested some things before this board, and number one thing is I have you properly zoned. That was the very first thing.
I can't hear you. Please speak up.
Your mic must not be on.
Okay. It's on, but it's not very loud.
Hello, hello. So when
There
I
we
made a
go.
request before this board, it's been some time ago for my current location, you instructed me it was crucial to be properly zoned first. So do I understand you in saying that now you will consider and give a conditional use permit even when the property is not currently zoned?
Were you
for
in the
that use?
process of rezoning the property?
That was not the question. The question was I properly zoned before I could even apply for the conditional use permit.
You're going to have to give me more background information.
I was told by Steve I must be properly zoned before requesting a conditional use permit to be considered before this board. Is that still the process?
And I know you're not going to like the answer, but that's not necessarily the process. And I think everybody here knows this is not your condition, your usual and ordinary request for a conditional use permit. There are a lot of things different about this, and you know, the people who have appealed for the conditional use permit have gone through the process of starting a rezoning. In fact, have been to the Planning Commission, and unless I'm mistaken, the Planning Commission has given a tentative approval. So they're in the process of rezoning it. And as you've heard here tonight, there's so many hurdles that they have to clear before they can get the battery storage system put on here. So you know, I understand your problem because you weren't allowed to do it, but this is a whole different ball game.
Can I respectfully ask what the difference is?
Yes, sir. The difference is they've already applied for the rezoning. They have had a hearing before the Planning Commission, and the rezoning is in process.
And when is that rezoning meeting?
Before the Planning Commission, it's already taken place, correct?
Yeah, it's already been done.
Hold on a minute. Mike, will you speak to this, because
Well, yes, at our December meeting, it will come back to us
A final vote.
for a final vote on it. Because we have to basically state all of, just like we do, has the facts that, for the verification for it. Right. And that's what Brian Bishop and all will develop those findings, and that will present it to us at the Planning Commission meeting, the first part of December.
can you give Mr. Freaks y'all's planning commission meeting date for December?
It will be it'll be the first Tuesday of the month.
Excellent. Would the board consider tabling this matter until after the conclusion of that, so that you don't make a judgment too hastily?
Well, Mr. Vernon, if we grant this conditional use, there are going to be conditions far more extensive than are in the usual conditional use permit. All those things that the fire department has talked about, all of the permitting process has got to be done before they can go forward and put in the best on this property. So
Okay, I understand. I just don't see the need to rush the matter. If it's not fully rezoned, there's a possibility that it won't be. I know it's a slim possibility because it is the city of Henderson and it is a city utility. But why put the cart before the horse? Why do we have to write a blank check for something that's not proven? Why can't they go ahead and decide what technology they want to use and have a plume study done and provide it to the fire department to give you some things? I heard the fire chief stand up here and say, I don't know, because he don't know what he don't know. I respect that. So why would, I don't want to expect you to do the same thing. Why do we expect you to give a conditional use for something that we don't know that's even going to be rezoned?
if it's not rezoned, there will be no conditional use permit. It will dissolve.
Thank you.
Please come forward. Did you sign in at the front desk? Oh, please state your name. Ms. McConaughey, do you promise to tell the truth? Okay.
I'm going to try and cram in some questions to the board, and I'm going to leave on the table for both, mainly for next year, some questions that I personally would want to have.
Ms. McConaughey, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm turning away after I didn't like it back there. All right.
Travis? Okay.
All right. Shall I keep going and I'll just yell?
That'd
Would
be
you
great.
pull the microphone down closer to you? Is it pretty close? Yeah, it is.
Way close.
Okay.
It doesn't make a difference if people are telling you, but I can yell, okay? Is that all right?
Hey, I'm a married man. I'm used to women yelling.
I live on a farm, so I have to call in a lot of animals. All right. I want to talk to the board, and I want to leave some questions for, is it next era? I want the board to think about some, when you listen to these presentations, I want you to know that I personally am also dealing with a very large facility proposed to be adjoining my farm. And so it's a different company, but I see a lot of similarities in when you're dealing with a company that's building something that I want to give you some cautionary thoughts. And what are those? It's really nice to go to the website and it looks pretty and they're going to do all wonderful things. And we saw some pretty slides, as they called them. But when they started speaking, these are details, but you got to listen carefully. So I'm sorry that I didn't catch your name. But she said that they would be lithium-ion batteries. But he says they're going to be lithium iron phosphate. Am I correct? They didn't say the same thing. So if I'm getting into the details and I'm putting up this kind of project, I want the professionals to get on the same page and tell me. Now, the lithium iron phosphate battery is a lot safer than the original lithium. So that's good news if that's what it is. But I want to know for a fact. Second thing for you guys, the other thing, I'm dealing with this other company, but you're doing it too. You say, oh, well, studies have shown that this plume doesn't go around. Studies have shown there's no groundwater. Show me the study. I don't believe you until you show me a legitimate, independent, academic, or some study, because there are a lot of smart people around here. And we can rustle up some people that can evaluate that. So it's not acceptable to come in and just say studies have shown, and we just buy that. Okay, so that bothers me.
And let me comment on that. The fire department.
I've still got time. I'm ready.
Okay. Oh yeah. The fire department, according to their document, has asked for both of those studies.
Well, but it's so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Because they talked about groundwater contamination studies, no problem. Let me pull another one out of the hat that I believe her name was Allison said. Nobody's talking about property values. They got up here just now and said, they don't know. Well, guess what? I've done a lot of research about property values. And with my company, I'll call them my company, the other best facility, when I asked about property values, they said, Mr. Richard Kirkland did a study and he found no negative impact on property values. So I said, okay, where's the study? I'm still waiting for their study. They never provide you what you asked for. And yet, I did my own research and I found not only some of Mr. Kirkland's work, but many, many other appraisers. So you have to be really careful what you're looking at, because some appraisers are hired by the solar proponent energy companies, right? And so you got to be on your toes, thinking all the time and how to evaluate these things. So that's another case where studies matter. So I wanted to bring up property values. One thing that was mentioned at the beginning here, oh, I'm out of time, can I?
I'm interested to hear what you say.
I'm really tidying this up, I really am.
Okay.
I sort of have this bad reputation for going on too long. Matt knows. Anyway, screening was mentioned at the very beginning. It was one of the big four things, or, you know, like it's a deal. I want the people at this best facility I want them to take that very seriously, because right now they're getting a chain link fence. It looks like a prison, and that isn't right. And what happens sometimes is they put in screening that are these conical arborvitae, and they die every fifth one in about, within the first year. It's just a terrible idea. So these people should be afforded a reasonable, attractive screening. One person suggested fencing. That has been used at some other best facilities. I leave it to you guys to work it out, okay? So screening is important. Property values are important. Make them show their data. Don't just take their word, and listen carefully, because we've had examples, small, but it matters if they're not all on the same page, singing the same song. For example, last thing, I promise, I have a question for the whole gang, which is, there are several root causes for fires. We talk a lot about thermal runaway and the cells and all that stuff. But what are the 3 top root causes of fires? Do you know? Yeah.
Okay.
So the 3 most common causes of fires are an internal cell failure, which, as I mentioned, is at a rate of about 1 in 10 to 1 in 40 million cells. Other are water infiltration. Our systems are rated to IP55 or NEMA 3R rating, such that they can handle any wind-driven rain that comes at them at basically for the area, for any moving speed. Really, those are the top 2 reasons. Other reasons would be, perhaps improper installation or a short circuiting of some sort. Again, the battery management system, certified to UL 1973, is designed specifically to identify any such incident like that and isolate the system immediately.
Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. What if it gets struck by lightning? What if it's a tornado nearby?
Oh, these systems are designed for typically the fastest wind that you're going to experience anywhere where the product is installed. So oftentimes companies will use Miami wind speeds for that type of...
I think you missed what he said, lightning.
Well,
both.
he said, yeah. As far as lightning, the systems are grounded, right? So they're made to withstand a lightning impact.
This is my last one, I promise. Okay.
You said it last time.
You're right. I said I'd tell the truth, and then he caught me in a lie. That's not good. So what I want to say is, he's right. Go look at the literature, because the reason I bring that up is the big question I have is, I have not yet found a centralized, my question is there a government agency that any incident of failure is reported we have FAA or we have, car seats or, then you gotta have somebody who's keeping track of that database. Is there such a database of incident failures? No, there's not. Not by the government, it's not regulated, it's not recorded. The single only database that gets used a lot is put forward by an energy-friendly, they're promoting development, okay? So that tells you something because everybody argues about, well, what's the incident report? We don't know because there's no regulation. This is such new technology that we don't know if this was an installation error. He's right. That's one root cause. Mechanical error, or was it a cellular, in the... So there's a lot we don't know. We don't have the data. And I'm pleading with you to go forward, but be armed with the studies and the data and listen carefully because it's really nice. You'll hear things that sound nice, but you gotta be careful, okay?
Thank you, Mrs. McConaughey.
Thank you.
Real quick, and she did mention the lithium iron or the lithium ion, and I
Yeah.
believe it was lithium iron
Yeah,
phosphate.
so Lena said lithium ion, I said lithium iron phosphate. We said the same thing, right? So lithium iron phosphate is a lithium ion technology. When you have lithium batteries, they come in essentially two forms. You have lithium ion and you have lithium metal, right? So there are multiple lithium ion technologies. Lithium iron phosphate is just one of them and the most safest of them.
And the lithium iron phosphate is the one that
Correct.
HMP&L is going to get.
Correct. That is correct, yes.
Yes, sir.
I think that's a really good point. I want to make sure everybody understands that the other predominant lithium-ion battery chemistry is called nickel, magnesium, cobalt. It's NMC. That is typically used in applications where you need a more dense battery. Those have had more incidents of thermal runaway, which is one of the primary risk factors that we're talking about. So, yes.
Are the studies that we've heard all about that we've not seen, are those on your website, or are they a place where our residents can access them and look at them for themselves?
I will have to defer to Nextera, but I will reiterate what I said earlier, is that we provided representative study data to the fire department and city officials. That was under a non-disclosure agreement because it's proprietary information from the battery manufacturer. That I would like for them.
Well, and I'm referring to studies that, so that our residents feel more comfortable and safe in what is happening in their backyard.
Yeah, so there was a recent event in San Diego County, Escondido. San Diego County, so San Diego County's government website has links to the air and water studies that show that there was no contamination. So those studies were, I don't know if they were necessarily performed by the government, unlikely. They were most likely performed by a third-party entity that is an expert in that. But those are available on the San Diego County government website.
They're not available on you guys' website?
They're not our studies.
Do you guys have
Well,
any?
So no, they're not available on our website. I mean, majority of studies that are done by third parties that weren't done specific to our technology or weren't done on our behalf are not going to be available from our website.
Well, I mean, but if you're putting your faith in them and using them as an avenue of support to us, why would you reference them on your website and put the correct, reference them on where they came from and who conducted them, and then you can link them to your website?
I don't manage our website, so I can't speak to that.
Do you guys have any studies from another facilities that when been run that somebody can tag in and see what has been gone wrong? Like the regulations, like she was mentioning.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Is anywhere that we can keep the track of what's been happening, what went wrong? Like she mentioned it, like car seats, like you have a study, what went wrong? Do you guys have anything like that?
I mean, there is one company that does keep a database of all
Yeah, yeah.
battery incidents. It's EPRI, E-P-R-I. I don't remember what the acronym stands for. But they do keep a log of all events that happen. Unfortunately, the information in there is limited, and they don't really provide root cause information. They just basically provide an incident did happen at this site and basically the size of the project and the owner-operator of the project.
So you said that when there's an incident, there's a follow-up report or study made on like why it happened, what caused it. In y'all's cases where there has been a situation, are those studies that you guys conducted on your website?
Well, as I mentioned previously, we've only ever had one event in our entire fleet, and it was contained to the rack and the container. We will, anytime an event happens, anytime anything goes wrong, I mean, not fire related at all, there's typically a root cause analysis done, but that information is usually proprietary.
Okay. So has y'all's company produced or done any of your studies of your own? Are you relying on other companies that have done them?
We almost always rely on other companies. You're not going to trust a study that came from us. You're going to trust a study that came from a third party who is specializing in doing
yes, okay,
that.
let me rephrase my question. Have you guys hired a third party to conduct any studies that you're willing to reference or produce, I guess?
I mean, if you're talking about the groundwater and
Environmental and smoke and toxic and gas.
I mean, yeah, like I mentioned before, we have had a plume study done for the particular technology that's going to be installed at this project. It was just done for a different project. But yes, and we have that done by third-party fire protection engineering companies.
Thank you. Anybody else speak for or against 3530? Please approach the podium.
While she's coming up, could I ask Ms. McCarthy, where the best that you were referring to as your best?
I wish I didn't have to refer to it that way. My best will be in the county, and they're talking about 12 megawatts, what you said? Mine would be 200 megawatts.
So this is minimal compared to what you have.
It is too, but this is on the smaller side.
Okay.
And 200 up to 600 is considered a larger area.
Okay, thank you.
He's asking just
I'm sorry.
an off-topic question. Your name?
Tammy Willett.
Ms. Willett, did you sign in?
I sure did.
Okay. Are you on Collier Road?
Yes,
Oh,
I am.
okay. Ms. Willett, do you promise to tell the truth?
I do.
What would you like to add?
Well, I think Eric and I kind of wrote the same notes, the same letter, and I am just a concerned resident in the area with all the potential adverse effects and all the what ifs. What if, what if, what if, what if? If it does contaminate the land, who is going to do the soil surveys and ensure that these lands, that our area is good for our children to play on, our pets to walk on, our pets come in our house? Who's going to ensure that this hydrogen cyanide that's released, the hydrogen chloride or the fluoride and all these toxic chemicals, what about all the combustible gases that are released? We talk about studies, and not 15 months, and nothing's been provided. So how long is it going to take to get a study? And is it going to be, another 15 months, and then they're going to be granted approval, and this thing is built, and then something happens, and it's like, oh, well, we're sorry, that wasn't part of it. So I'm just a concerned citizen, resident, and I want our voices to be heard. Mm-hmm. I don't want us to be ignored. I want everyone on this board to understand the concern of this new technology. This is new. This is not something that, just like PFAS. Whoever thought that PFAS would be an issue now? But look where it is now. What are we going to do now if this contamination becomes an issue? I got grandchildren. I don't want them exposed to this. I don't want them to have to, what am I going to do if there is you have to shelter in place? They're saying you don't have to because there's going to be a barrier But where's the study at? We're going on what ifs. We don't know. If you look at all the other areas, there have been evacuations just for safety precautions. If you look at the incident that happened in California just recently, I think it was in September of this year, there was an evacuation area. But yeah, who's going to say that there's not going to be evacuation for these elderly, that are living in these households? What are they going to do? Who's going to tend to them? Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to bring them stuff? Who's responsible? Who's going to take the legal liability for all this? So I just ask for you to understand that we are concerned citizens and just hear us.
Thank you. Mr. Pickett?
So the answer to the main concern that I heard was who's be responsible, and that will absolutely be Henderson Municipal Power and Light. Full faith and credit of the city of Henderson behind Temple. We deal with other products, equipment that have potential environmental impacts. Oil field transformers. We absolutely remediate and deal with any type of contamination that would be caused by our infrastructure. This facility would be no different.
Thank you.
I have a question. I know it's bringing in a lot of infrastructure. I know it's for the best of the community to grow, and it's what we want. So a few questions. How much is going to cost?
So the cost to us is going to be in the form of a payment that we make every month to NextEra to use the facility.
Okay.
And what I will tell you, and I can give it to you in price per a unit.
Just, it don't have to be a specific number, just an average.
So it's going to be around a little over $100,000 a month.
Okay, so we're talking $1.2 million a year.
Right. So this capacity, can I expand?
Okay.
The 12 megawatt battery, if we don't have it, it's going to cost us about $2.5 million.
Okay. Well, here's my other question. You guys got all this money to build it. I don't know how much it's going to cost you guys. $5, $6, $10 million. And don't get approval. Are you guys willing to raise $5, $6 million to just don't be approved? And let's already build it and come back and say, you know what, we already built it, so let's build it now, we just use it.
Can I read?
With all the safety concerns.
Right. We are not going to start building it until the final construction drawings are ready, site plan's done, plume study's done, all the studies. We have provided indicative studies under non-disclosure agreement. Those will all be done. The fire department will have final approval. If they do not approve this project, reiterate this once again, the project will not get built.
Don't get me wrong, it's been 15 months and they don't have safety.
I want to speak to that. That was also brought up earlier. So we engaged with the fire department very early, and so it's lost a little bit, and it's important to provide context. We engaged with the fire department before we even had NextEra on board. So
Okay.
we started those conversations day one, literally. And so as we've had meetings, we've been bringing NextEra in so that they can share and talk about what they're going to do. So it sounds bad when somebody says we haven't had anything we asked for 15 months ago. You've asked for documents that are going to be available at the time of construction. We've been in this project for 2 years, completely, from the day of the issuance of the request for proposals. And I want to comment too, earlier, I made this comment before, some of these companies are coming into town because they want to connect to the high voltage transmission system and they want to put their project on the grid. We've asked them to come to town. We spec'd out what we want them to do. We've got an engineering consultant that's working with us on commercial terms. We've got a legal consultant that's working on legal terms outside of our general counsel, and they are crossing T's and dotting I's. We are looking at this from every angle, and we welcome the consultant that the fire department's brought in, the fire safety expert, who brings additional experience and knowledge to this project. So I just want to reiterate that this is not a project you do in 3 months. This project has been in the works for a long time. And so, yes.
So you just made a comment that those documents will be provided to the fire department, as construction is getting ready to get started. How can he give an approval on a document you hand him a week prior to being ready to go do this? I mean, I don't think
They've
that.
got as long as they want. When they're prepared for the fire department to approve, that has to happen before we can proceed with the construction of the project.
I mean, I guess one thing I would ask is, I mean, would it be sensible to conduct a plume study if it's, especially if it's so important, understanding what the conditional use for the site? But does it make sense to conduct that study, even without our approval for that site, just so you have that study and have that data to provide?
And I think it's been mentioned a couple times, there was a representative plume study provided, which is basically the technology, the battery system itself. The difference between that and what's going to happen at the final site plan is that you're going to have the topography of the land, you're going to have the actual as-built drawings, and know exactly what you're dealing with, just know how that gas is going to move from the site. We can't get that final plume study that you're asking about, wish we could, until our engineering is complete, or until our site plan is complete. That's the challenge, right? Because a plume study is site-specific. It's got to be done as if the project's going to be built and as it's ready to be built. And we're not there yet. So like I think it was mentioned earlier, 60% engineering is required, I think, at a minimum. And we've got to have a site to kick this off.
So these studies cannot be, so are all the studies non-disclosure confidential in the sense that the residents that are right next door can't read them, or we can't see them? I mean, are they that?
They can be provided under a non-disclosure agreement. The reason is because it's proprietary the manufacturer of equipment doesn't want that information shared with competition, with competing battery manufacturers. And we deal with that from time to time.
Yeah.
Now, I think it was described earlier, the gas composition, to tell you kind of what is made up in the gas and the plume. But the plume study shows you not just what's the composition, but how does it dissipate as it leaves, as it moves out.
And I'd also like to clarify, we weren't, a plume study has been requested within the past month. Prior to that, we had no request for a plume study. It's not typical for all projects.
Kentucky has a lot of land.
A significant majority of our projects do not require a plume study. It is only when.
And your typical project, how far you are from the public?
We always maintain, all of our projects are different. We maintain a remote location designation per NFPA 855, which this project actually qualifies for that designation.
So most of your projects are far away from the public, right?
We have a variety of projects that are both close to town and out in more rural areas.
Let me make sure I understood what you said. The locality for this site is within the remoteness that's recommended?
The distance from this project to the lot lines does fall under NFPA 855's designation for a remote location installation. But this is one of those situations where you are a little bit closer to residences. So, you know, we're not necessarily arguing against a plume study. We're absolutely going to have a plume study done. I just want to point out that a plume study was not requested 15 months ago or 9 months ago or 6 months ago. The plume study was requested within the last month. And those types of studies take 90 to 120 days to complete. And so they take a very, very long time. So when we were requested for a plume study within the past 30 days, there's just no possible way we'd have a plume study today.
So okay, then, and I may need to ask this question. What documents were requested that haven't been provided to the fire, that are going to be due at site plan?
I would also, before they answer that, I would also like to point out that the list of documents.
So is all that list?
That list was provided to us an hour before the meeting today.
Okay.
One last question. Do you have any other project similar
to what you're doing here today?
Yeah, we have many projects similar to what we're doing here today.
Can you guys provide like what has been going on near those projects?
So, for example,
property value, insurance, things like that, where is the concern, pollution?
Again, as Lena mentioned, there is no evidence that battery energy storage projects affect the property value. We can't speak to insurance because there are a variety of impacts that affect insurance. So unless the insurance company specifically says, we're raising your rates because a battery energy storage system was installed in your neighborhood, that those rate increases can't necessarily be attributed to that. The plume study that we had done is in an area that is 150 feet from the nearest piece of equipment to the property line of the nearest residence, which is actually closer than this project. And as I mentioned, that plume study determined that as long as the first responders stay outside of the fence line of the project, they're still a long distance from the neighboring residents' property line. As long as they stay outside of the fence line, they're not at risk of any plume inhalation or anything like that.
We're getting into a lot of repetition here.
Yeah.
Can you take the podium?
Yes, sir.
You have a question?
What documents have you guys requested that you've been waiting 15 minutes for?
So it may not have been officially called the plume study, I'm just a fireman, but since the first time we've met about this, and I've been talking to Brad, my main concern is if we have no way to combat this fire, then and it's supposed to release the gases, then what's my distance that I need to be worried about? So that's been my main point of concern ever since my first meeting when I was
Just trying to obtain the distance.
I didn't know what the official time was before, but once we brought in our consultants, that's come on, so it might have been an official request in the next few months of what the specific data is, but part of that community risk analysis will include that data.
And second of all, and you may not know the answer to this, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask it. Is there any equipment that you're aware of that you would need specialized over top of what you guys have if there was a catastrophic event?
To
Or to fight or
immediately go to,
combat all this?
I mean, from talking with other fire protection engineers and talking back and forth with them, I mean, we have no intention, unless there's somebody down that was working on one of those, of entering the facility or actually actively engaging with the construct, or the material at all. So our guys will just be there to make sure that we set up the correct perimeter, make sure that everybody's safe from the outside, but we don't have any capability to do anything with it except letting them burn out and letting them take care of it. So they're the expert guys, so we just want to make sure the people around are safe.
Well, and I just want to make sure fires getting provided the documentation that they needed in a timely manner to make educated decisions.
Absolutely, and we'll provide all those documents and studies, again, well before the actual site plan approval of the project. But just to reiterate, there is no special equipment required for the firefighters and first responders if responding to a battery.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you the elephant in the room then. You tell me what your cons are for your company.
Your what?
Every cons, because every company's got pros and cons. So we've heard from a variety of people. Is there any one that you can give me that would be a con in your opinion? Because every company has them. It's not unheard of.
I guess I don't quite understand the con, like in.
Is there any negative to your company?
In the event of.
Any negative period?
I mean, anytime something like that, you'll get bad publicity. That's a con for the company, right? Whether it was contained or whether the situation was handled as exactly it was supposed to be, you're still going to get bad press, right? So that's detrimental to us as well, and we lose property, right? In that event, we are losing property, but at that point, the only thing we care about is safety.
Is there anybody that would like to speak for or against Appeal 3530? Anybody that would like to speak for?
I had a minute left on the clock, I know they for
Okay.
There was a letter submitted.
Okay. Yes, we'll get to the letter. Does it relate to this case, 3530?
Yes.
Okay.
So again, I am a volunteer fireman, so my knowledge is about this because it's not a full-time job. I am required, before I'm able to respond, to do a state mandated 150 hours of training and then do 20 hours a year to keep my credentials. Since joining the fire department, I've learned a lot. And I sat in a class given by a gentleman from the EPA that was filled with all of my superiors, and when I mean superiors, chiefs, some officials of the county. And in that meeting, from the gentleman from the EPA, not Google, he told us 1 mile evacuation during a fire event from a BESS system. He told us, and again, all gentlemen in the room, a lot higher than me, he told us plume study was a have to. Mr. Bickett, I think he said 50 feet. His experts, I've heard 50 to 100 feet. I was told 1 mile. As a father, a landowner, business owner, 1 mile scares the shit out of me. So I'm going to leave you with that. I just received the email today with a big bunch of documents I plan on sharing with the fire chief from the EPA. They were working that fatality in Louisville. So again, I just wanted to share that with you. There's a huge discrepancy there. The fact of the matter is the standards haven't caught up with the technology. So there are real dangers here to consider. My request earlier for you to table it would have been, I think, for everyone's benefit. But if you have to make a decision tonight, I ask you to really think it through because there are some real risks, a lot of unknowns. Thank you.
Before you leave,
yeah,
tell us again what type of fire that was that they recommended a 1 mile evacuation.
Any fire where these things release the chemical gas, in that class, he said there were only 6 monitors in the country that could monitor the gases given off by these things. Now again, my knowledge is this, but I do know when an expert sits in a room, you sit up and pay attention, right? The problem is, where's the expertise coming from? The gentleman he's with the EPA. He has those government credentials, so I have to believe him. And until Mr. Dixon says it's safe, until my fire chief says it's safe, I'm going to keep repeating and preparing for what I was told.
Well, until Mr. Dixon and the fire department sign off on it, it's not going to happen.
That's true. Without a plume study, they can never do that.
Right.
And how can you build something without a plume study? So why not have the plume study? I think
Well,
it all goes back to the initial question.
Is the plume study in process?
Don't
Or
sound
been
like it.
requested? Mr. Adams?
It was requested.
The plume study at the project level is in process. Again, as mentioned before, we cannot do a full project level plume study until we're at 60+% design of a project. We can't get to 60+% design of the project without a commissioning.
Okay.
Can you provide the study that he's mentioning?
Who do you want?
Mr. Franks?
Yeah. Can you
Okay.
provide those?
Do you want him back?
Can you provide that study? The documents that you mentioned
Like I said, I just received the email from the gentleman. I plan on providing the documents to Mr. Dixon, but I'm sure that I'll take at least a month and a half for him to cipher through. It's quite a large email. And since you didn't table the matter, you're forced to make a decision. So,
But if we make a decision tonight, and if the conditional use permit is granted, the project still can't go forward until the fire department sees the plume study and sees all the studies they requested and say,
what's your question to me again?
if you can provide the document.
I will absolutely provide it to Mr. Dixon. Isn't it?
Mr. Bickett, did anybody on your team want to respond to that? Okay. Is anybody here that wants to speak for or against 3530? Anybody here that wants to speak for or against 3530? Okay. I do have a letter that needs to be read.
I'm not sure this is a letter. I think the Director of Community Services with Matthew 25 was here and had to leave, so she left her statement for me to read.
Okay, and then she swore her,
She was in
somebody
attendance.
swore herself in.
Yes.
And what is her
Dawn.
name? Read her name.
Okay. Sally Welch, Director of Community Services. I swear this is the truth. representing Matthew 25 Aid Services, Inc. at 452 Old Cordon Road, Henderson, Kentucky, 42420. Matthew 25 is a nonprofit healthcare clinic whose mission is to serve those at risk for living with or impacted by HIV or other STIs through inclusive healthcare, education, and support while fostering community partnerships to combat stigma and improve overall healthcare and quality of life. We provide at this location clinical medical services, food pantry, medical case management, housing program, transportation services with 8 vehicles that transport patients to our clinic and other critical medical services outside of our organization. Question she had was, why can't this project be further away from our business and surrounding residences? If they state cost, etc., additional question to ask, is the interpretation of business and lives of residents not the highest priority here? What about our safety? Another question, if there were to be an incident such as a fire or something else, how will that impact Matthew 25 and our operations? How long would the impact be for operations? Who would be responsible for our losses or inability to operate? Another question, if there was an incident that caused an interruption of operations, will Hempel reimburse Matthew 25? If shelter in place, we cannot accommodate our vulnerable clients, or if it happens on a weekend and couldn't get to the facility, it would place a tremendous hardship on their client they serve.
Is that it? Okay. I believe you have answered most of those questions, but there are some that you haven't answered. If you would like to have the letter in hand to answer them, you can, or if you can answer them from memory.
It might be helpful, and if you could remind me on the points that you would like me to talk
Well,
about.
if you want to just kind of read through,
So I think one of the main points that I need to make is that the location of the substation is on this property. That's what's primarily driving the location for this battery system. I mentioned earlier, I think it was commented earlier, that some of the industry was there before the substation. The substation was built around 1990. Some of it was built before that, and it was expanded in the early 90s. Before that, this area was served by another substation we have up closer to what was called the Y, up in that area there. So the fact that we have that substation located there, and the fact that we have appropriate distance from any structure based on the technology that we're going with today, we wouldn't be putting the battery system here if it was the older technology that was referenced earlier in the concerns. We've talked about the incident of fire. There is no impact to the Matthew 25 facility in that event. There's simply not a risk to a building that's that far away from this facility. Is there anything else from here that you all would like me to expand on?
No.
Okay.
No. I'll get back with you. And again, is there anybody here that would like to speak for or against Appeal 3530? Anybody who would like to speak for or against 3530? Okay, please approach the podium, and I'll remind you that you are still under oath.
My name's Tammy. It's actually for the fire chief.
Speak louder, please.
My name is Tammy Willett, and it's actually for the fire chief. I forgot to ask, if one of these thermal runaways does occur, or a fire of some sort, and it happens to be on a windy day, and it obviously goes to the next battery storage tank, and the fire department is there, And of course, they're not supposed to spray water. We all know that. They're supposed to burn out. But is there a liability for the fire department that's going to have to stay there to make sure those other units are cooled down, because it's going to be a continuous domino effect? So is the fire department going to stay there and be inhaling all these toxic gases? Are we going to have the resources to do that? What about the health consequences down the road? You know, look at 9/11. You know, the EPA director then said, oh, it's safe for New Yorkers to go on ground zero. Well, guess what? 2 years, 2 months, 6 months, all these firefighters, first responders started dying. So we need to look at all these questions and look at the health hazards that's being placed on our residents, the first responders, everyone in that area. But I kind of want to know, is that going to be an issue? Will they have to stay there to make sure those other cooling units do not, or those storage units do not catch on fire as well?
Thank you, Captain.
Yes, we'll still be there. We're not gonna leave. Exposures are huge too, so, I mean, once we're there, we're committed until it's done. Whether that's a few hours or that's 7 days, whatever it is, we're committed to it.
If there's exposure problems, are you looking at possibly SCBA?
Whatever PPE requires, we'll have.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Yes, sir.
So I guess I'd address the concern of it traveling from one container to another. As I mentioned before, UL 9540A testing demonstrates that a fire in one energy storage container will not travel to an adjacent container, and those results were corroborated or verified or confirmed by Mike Hopkins, who is part of the fire department.
Thank you. Mr. Stinson, I've been very lenient with your 3 minutes, but if you would like 3 minutes more, I'm going to limit you to 3 minutes.
I'll be brief.
Okay.
I think we're still standing at the same spot. You can't tell me it's safe if you haven't done an environmental impact assessment to determine the factors like potential soil contamination, impact on wildlife, and groundwater. You can't tell me it's safe if you hadn't done the study. Second of all, I don't care how a plume floats in Miami. We live in Kentucky. Every environment is different. Every site is different. The land lays different. This land butts up behind a creek that could directly affect our groundwater. Secondly, you haven't done an impact assessment, or community impact assessment, and they're required to address concerns over property values, air quality, and public health. Neither one of them have been concerned, so you can't tell me it's safe definitively because you don't know. Secondly, I keep hearing a lot of acronyms, and they're impressive. I mean, if you say them real fast, they make you sound very credible. But the reality is the NFPA code is nothing but the national NFPA 855 that's been referenced several times, is nothing but the main standard, the base standard of an energy storage system. It sets potential guidelines on fire suspension, containment, and emergency responses. The reality is most municipalities exceed and request that they exceed the standards 855 that he keeps throwing out there, with additional firewalls, additional cooling systems, and additional ventilation. The fact is you don't know it's safe. You can't approve it. You're putting your citizens in danger if you do approve it. And you're taking the word of a next era employee on feasibility studies that are 15 minutes in the waiting. He's talking about a plume study, not a complete environmental assessment. I'll pay for the environmental panel. An independent person will do an environmental impact assessment, and I'll do a community impact assessment, and we'll come to the truth instead of what somebody wants to tell us. But it's your job to fight for us and fight for our community and fight for our safety. That needs to be done this evening. This is an unsafe, and until you can tell me definitively it is safe, you shouldn't say, okay, now you get 60% down the road. That way we're so far down the road that we have to approve it. They're at 30% for a reason. I'm not a rocket scientist, but I can tell you this, they're at 30% because they want to get to 60 because that'll get them to 100 without ever referencing the dangers or the impact studies that have been requested. Thank you. And I apologize and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I'm gonna speak real slowly, and I'm not gonna use any acronyms.
Please don't.
Every one of those concerns will be addressed in this document as I've read it, that's been provided by the fire department. And every one of these items has a check that's either approved, is it yes or no?
I appreciate your time, Mr. Soltis. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody here to speak for or against Appeal 3530? Yes, you may.
My name is Abigail Wheaton. I would just like to point out two things. Number one, not one resident here has said that this is a good idea. The second thing that I would like to say, if you will indulge me, I am a history teacher. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory met all those safety regulations too, and that killed 114 women. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I will start again. Is there anybody here that would like to speak for or against Appeal 3530? Is there anybody here that would like to speak for or against Appeal 3530? If there is nobody here that would like to speak for or against Appeal 3530, I will close the open forum and ask for a motion.
Well, I'll end the suspense. And I want to make a statement before I read this motion. Y'all forgive me. I've got back trouble and been sitting for a long time. This is new technology. It's not brand new. We have best facilities all over the nation. Galileo was the first to say the planets revolved around the sun instead of everything else revolving around the earth. He met with a rather untimely demise. There, you know, the little cards, the little greeting cards that you open and it plays a song? There's more computer power in that card than existed in the world in 1950. Now, 1950 is a long way ago for a lot of you, but I remember it. I also remember 1985 in Henderson, when a subsidiary of, name escapes me, Union Carbide, called Unison, proposed a PCB separation plant in Henderson. And the outroar, the outrage, and the supposed facts that were presented were unbelievable. Some of you may remember 1985. I remember it well. And the city was told if you grant this, or maybe it was the county, it's going to be the end of the world. This is the most dangerous substance known to mankind. And the facility was built. It provided hundreds of jobs. It was a model corporate citizen for the 10 years that it serviced the country in separating PCBs and disposing of them properly. And nobody that came up to speak, or very few anyway, spoke in favor of it. but it was something that was needed. I trust Hempel. I trust our fire department, and I trust our planning commission. This won't go forward if the planning commission doesn't rezone the property. And I'm going to make a motion, I'm going to put conditions on it that I think will satisfy my mind that it is safe enough to be put where it's going to be put. And what I'm going to do tonight is going to meet with a lot of disapproval. And those of you that know me know that I'm not a stranger to disapproval. So with that said, I move that we grant appeal number 3530 for a conditional use permit to allow Henderson Municipal Power and Light, hereafter called Hempel, to construct a battery energy storage system, hereafter referred to as BESS, on the property located at 2230 South Green Street, Henderson, Kentucky, which is currently zoned general business, but which is in the process of being rezoned heavy industrial, M2, with the following conditions. 1, the property must be rezoned M2 before the conditional use permit becomes effective. 2, there will be 24/7, 365, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, except on a leap year, which will be 366. Monitoring of the BESS, including gas and smoke detection. 3, the lot containing the BESS shall be enclosed by a 7-foot tall fence around the boundary of the lot. The fence shall be aesthetically pleasing and approved by the Codes Administration of the City of Henderson. 4, all noise levels are not to exceed 50 decibels during the day and 45 decibels at night, as measured 25 feet from the residence facade. 6, lighting will be at a minimum required for safety and operation and reasonably shielded from the abutting properties. 7, signage shall be limited to the regulatory signage, including hazards and emergency contact information. 8, all conditions contained in the November 20, 2024 letter with attachments from Summit Fire Consultants and approved by the Henderson Fire Department must be met before the BESS can be placed on the property. The approved conditional use permit is for the property. Evidence submitted through the written documentation attached to the appeal and submitted through the testimony at the preceding hearing confirms, and we find, 1, the property will be rezoned M2 before the BESS can be placed on the property. 2, the BESS will allow Hempel to improve resiliency and maintain low-cost energy for their customers by providing electricity during outages, extreme weather events, or when power prices should otherwise be high. 3, the BESS can improve reliability and power quality and help reduce the need for expensive electric system upgrades. 4, the BESS will result in substantial monetary savings to Hempel and thus to the citizens of Henderson.
May I get a second? I will second it.
Do what?
I will second it. Sarah, may we get a vote?
Mac,
No.
Heather,
No.
Landon,
Yes.
Marcus.
No.
Mr. Bickett, Appeal 3530 has not passed. Thank you for your time. Everybody, thank you for your time. Have a good evening. Motion to approve
Motion
the
to
minutes.
approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion made and carried. Is there any other business to come before this board?
Motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Huh?
You want me to